Picture this. You're standing at the altar in your dream wedding dress, waiting for the moment you've planned for 2 years. The church is packed, the flowers are perfect, and then complete chaos. Your own sister just dropped a bombshell that shattered everything. But here's the twist. Her betrayal led me straight into the arms of her billionaire ex-boyfriend. And when he proposed 6 months later, let's just say karma had some serious plans. This is the story of how my sister's sabotage became the best thing that ever happened to me. I'd love to know which corner of the globe you're watching from. And if this story speaks to you, make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's video is one you absolutely can't miss. My name is Ria, and until 8 months ago, I thought I had the perfect life mapped out. I was 26, working as a marketing coordinator in downtown Seattle, and completely head over heels in love with my fiancé, Marcus Chen. We'd been together for 3 years, and he'd proposed on a romantic weekend trip to the San Juan Islands. Everything felt like it was falling into place exactly as it should. Marcus was everything I thought I wanted in a husband. He was stable, reliable, and worked as an accountant at a prestigious firm downtown. He had this way of making me feel secure, like our future was predictable and safe. We'd already put a down payment on a modest townhouse in Bellevue, and I could picture our life together. Sunday morning pancakes, joint tax returns, maybe kids in a few years. The only complicated part of my otherwise simple life was my relationship with my sister, Natosha. She's 2 years older than me and has always been the dramatic one in our family. Where I was content with my steady job and quiet lifestyle, Natasha was constantly chasing the next big adventure. She'd moved to Los Angeles right after college to pursue acting, though she spent more time working as a high-end cocktail waitress than actually auditioning. Natasha had this magnetic personality that drew people to her, especially men. She was stunning in that effortless way that made other women both envious and insecure. Long auburn hair, emerald eyes, and the kind of confidence that could light up a room or destroy it, depending on her mood. Growing up, I'd always been the responsible sister, the one who got good grades and followed the rules, while Natasha was the one who snuck out at night and came home with stories that both shocked and fascinated our parents. Despite our differences, we were close, or at least I thought we were. She'd been genuinely excited when Marcus proposed and immediately volunteered to be my maid of honor. She flew up from LA multiple times to help with wedding planning, and we spent countless hours choosing flowers, tasting takes, and trying on dresses together. The wedding planning process had been intense but magical. Marcus and I decided on a classic church ceremony at St. Mark's Cathedral, followed by a reception at the Fairmont Olympic Hotel. I dreamed of this exact wedding since I was a little girl, and every detail was carefully chosen to create the perfect romantic atmosphere. Blush pink roses and white peonies, string quartet music, vintage lace details on everything from the invitations to my dress. My dress was the centerpiece of the entire event. I'd found it at a boutique in Capitol Hill after trying on dozens of options. It was a classic A-line silhouette with intricate beadwork on the bodice and a cathedral-length train that made me feel like an actual princess. The moment I put it on, I knew it was the one. Even the boutique staff started crying when they saw me in it. Natasha had been with me when I found the dress, and she'd been just as emotional as everyone else. She kept saying how perfect it was, how Marcus would lose his mind when he saw me walking down the aisle. Her enthusiasm made the moment even more special, and I felt so grateful to have her there sharing this milestone with me. The guest list was intimate, about 150 people, including family, close friends, and colleagues. Marcus's family flew in from Vancouver, and my extended family was coming from all over the Pacific Northwest. We'd hired an amazing photographer, a florist who specialized in romantic garden-style arrangements, and a band that played the perfect mix of jazz standards and contemporary love songs. 3 weeks before the wedding, Natasha arrived in Seattle for the final preparations. She was staying at my apartment, and we fell into this wonderful routine of wedding tasks during the day and sister bonding time in the evenings. We'd order takeout, drink wine, and talk about everything from childhood memories to our hopes for the future. It felt like we were closer than we'd ever been. She helped me with the seating chart, addressed the last of the invitations, and even came with me to the final dress fitting. The seamstress made tiny adjustments to ensure the fit was absolutely perfect, and Natasha took a dozen photos of me in the dress to send to our mom. everything was coming together beautifully. The week of the wedding was a whirlwind of final details. The rehearsal dinner was scheduled for Friday night at a cozy Italian restaurant in Fremont, followed by the ceremony on Saturday at 4 in the afternoon. Marcus and I had decided to keep things traditional, no seeing each other on the wedding day until I walked down the aisle. Friday's rehearsal went flawlessly. Everyone knew their roles, the timing was perfect, and the chemistry between Marcus and I felt stronger than ever. During the dinner afterward, both of our fathers gave heartfelt toasts about love, commitment, and the bright future ahead of us. Marcus held my hand under the table and whispered how excited he was to call me his wife in less than 24 hours. That night, I barely slept, not from nerves, but from pure anticipation. I kept thinking about how perfect everything was going to be, how this was the beginning of the rest of my life with the man I loved. Natasha and I stayed up talking until almost 2 in the morning, sharing stories and laughing about our childhood. She seemed genuinely happy for me, and I felt so lucky to have her as my sister and maid of honor. Saturday morning dawned bright and clear, the perfect September day in Seattle. The kind of crisp, sunny weather that makes the city look like a postcard. I woke up feeling energized and excited, ready to become Mrs. Marcus Chen. The bridal suite at the Fairmont was bustling with activity by 9 a.m. My hairstylist arrived first, followed by the makeup artist, photographer, and florist delivering my bouquet. Natasha orchestrated everything like a professional wedding planner, making sure I had everything I needed while keeping the mood light and fun. My bouquet was even more beautiful than I'd imagined, white peonies and blush roses with trailing ribbons and tiny pearl accents. The photographer captured every moment as I held it for the first time, and I could see in the mirror that I was glowing with happiness. The hair and makeup process took almost 3 hours, but it was so relaxing and enjoyable. Natasha kept us all entertained with stories from her LA adventures, and my bridesmaids, my 2 college roommates, Sarah and Emma, helped create the perfect celebratory atmosphere. Classical music played softly in the background while we sipped mimosas and watched me transform into a bride. When it was time to put on the dress, the whole room went quiet. The photographer captured every moment as Natasha and my bridesmaids helped me step into it, carefully arranging the train and securing every button. When I turned to look in the full-length mirror, I couldn't believe the woman staring back at me. I looked exactly like the bride I dreamed of being. The dress fit like it had been made specifically for my body. The hair was elegant and romantic, and the makeup enhanced my features without looking overdone. But more than anything, I looked happy, radiant even, the kind of happiness that comes from knowing you're about to marry your soulmate. The photographer took dozens of photos of me alone, then with my bridesmaids, and finally with my parents when they arrived to see me before the ceremony. My mom started crying the moment she walked into the room, and even my normally stoic father got emotional when he saw me in my wedding dress. Everything was perfect. Absolutely, completely perfect. And that's exactly when it all started falling apart. The limousine ride to St. Mark's Cathedral should have been magical. Instead, it became the longest 15 minutes of my life, though I didn't know it yet. Natasha sat across from me, checking her phone constantly while I stared out the window at the Seattle streets rushing by. The afternoon sun cast everything in golden light, and I remember thinking how cinematically perfect it all looked. "You're going to make Marcus faint when he sees you," Natasha said, finally looking up from her screen. But there was something odd in her voice, a tension I couldn't quite place. "Are you nervous?" I shook my head, smoothing down my dress. Not nervous, just ready. I've been ready for this day since he proposed. She nodded, but her smile seemed forced. Her phone buzzed again, and she glanced at it quickly before shoving it into her clutch. "Ria, I need to tell you something." Before I could respond, the limousine pulled up to the cathedral. Through the windows, I could see guests streaming into the building, everyone dressed in their finest clothes. The church looked exactly like my vision, elegant, timeless, perfect. My heart started racing with excitement. "It can wait until after," I said, gathering my train. "Whatever it is, we'll figure it out later. Right now, I just want to focus on marrying Marcus." The look on Natasha's face was strange, almost guilty, but I was too caught up in the moment to analyze it. The driver opened our door, and my bridesmaids, Sarah and Emma, appeared to help arrange my dress on the cathedral steps. Everything was happening exactly as we'd rehearsed. Inside the church's bridal suite, my parents were waiting with tears in their eyes. My dad looked distinguished in his classic black tuxedo, while my mom was radiant in navy blue silk. The photographer captured every moment as they saw me in my full bridal ensemble for the first time outside the hotel. "My beautiful daughter," Dad whispered, kissing my forehead. "Marcus is the luckiest man alive." The wedding coordinator, Mrs. Patterson, appeared in the doorway with her clipboard and headset. "Ladies, we're 5 minutes out. Bridesmaids, it's time to line up." This was it, the moment I'd been planning and dreaming about for 2 years. Sarah and Emma took their positions, looking elegant in their dusty rose dresses. Natasha, as my maid of honor, would walk down the aisle just before me. But as we lined up in the church vestibule, I noticed Natasha was trembling. Her bouquet shook in her hands, and she kept taking deep breaths like she was trying to hyperventilate. "Tosh, are you okay?" I whispered, suddenly concerned. "You look like you're about to be sick." She turned to me with tears in her eyes, and for a split second, I thought she was just emotional about her little sister getting married. "Rhea, I'm so sorry. I never meant for any of this to happen." A lot of love and effort went into bringing this story to life. If you're enjoying it, we'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe to our channel. Now, back to where we left off. Before I could ask what she meant, the organ music began. The familiar strains of Pachelbel's canon filled the cathedral, and Mrs. Patterson started directing the bridesmaids down the aisle. Sarah went first, then Emma, both walking with the perfect pace we'd practiced. "Natasha, you're up," Mrs. Patterson whispered. But Natasha didn't move. Instead, she grabbed my hands, crushing our bouquets between us. "I can't let you do this without knowing the truth." What truth? My heart was starting to pound, but not with excitement anymore. "Natasha, what are you talking about?" "Marcus has been cheating on you." The words came out in a rush, like she'd been holding them back for weeks. "With me. We've been having an affair for the past 6 months." The world stopped. The organ music continued playing, but it sounded distant and distorted. I could hear the guests shuffling in their pews, probably wondering why the maid of honor hadn't appeared yet. But all I could focus on were Natasha's words echoing in my head. "That's not funny," I managed to say, though my voice sounded strange and hollow. "Don't joke about something like that. Not today." "I'm not joking." Tears were streaming down her face now, ruining her carefully applied makeup. "It started when I came up for the engagement party planning. We were both drunk after dinner, and one thing led to another. We tried to stop, but we couldn't. We fell in love, Rhea. Real love." The bouquet slipped from my numb fingers and hit the marble floor with a soft thud. White petals scattered around my feet like fallen snow. "You're lying." "I have proof." She pulled out her phone with shaking hands, swiping to her photo gallery. "I didn't want to show you, but you need to see." The first photo made my knees buckle. Marcus, in the shirt I'd bought him for his birthday, kissing Natasha in what looked like a hotel room. The timestamp showed it was taken just 3 weeks ago, the same weekend he'd told me he was working late on a big client project. There were more photos, dozens of them. Marcus and Natasha at restaurants I'd never been to, holding hands in Pike Place Market, embracing on a beach that definitely wasn't in Seattle. Text message screenshots showing intimate conversations, plans to meet up, declarations of love. "Stop," I whispered, but I couldn't look away from the screen. Each image was like a physical blow, knocking the air from my lungs. "The night he proposed to you, he called me crying," Natasha continued, her words tumbling out in a desperate rush. "He said he was making a mistake, but he couldn't back out because the family ring and the weekend was already planned and everyone was expecting it. He's been trying to figure out how to call off the wedding without hurting you." "Then why didn't he?" The question came out as a sob. "Why let me plan this entire wedding if he's in love with you?" Because he's a coward. Her voice was bitter now. He kept saying he needed more time, that he'd figure it out. But Rhea, I can't stand here and watch you marry someone who doesn't love you. You deserve better than that. Mrs. Patterson appeared at my elbow, looking frazzled. Ladies, we really need to move. The guests are getting restless, and the photographer's asking about the timeline. I stared at her blankly. The wedding, the ceremony. Marcus was standing at the altar right now, waiting for me to walk down the aisle so we could pledge our lives to each other. 150 guests were seated in the pews, expecting to witness our perfect love story. But it was all a lie. I need to sit down, I said faintly. There's no time to sit down, Mrs. Patterson replied, clearly not understanding the magnitude of what had just happened. We're already running behind schedule. Cancel it. The words came out stronger than I felt. Cancel the wedding. Mrs. Patterson's face went white. Excuse me? You heard me. Call it off. Tell everyone to go home. But Miss Morrison, there are 150 people out there. The reception is paid for, the vendors. I don't care about the vendors. The words exploded out of me, echoing off the stone walls. My fiancé has been sleeping with my sister for 6 months. There's not going to be a wedding. The poor woman looked like she might faint. She started stammering something about protocols and procedures that I was already moving. I had to see Marcus face to face. I had to look him in the eyes and hear him admit what he'd done. I pushed past Mrs. Patterson and headed toward the sanctuary doors. Behind me, I could hear Natasha calling my name, but I ignored her. The organ music was still playing our processional, and through the glass doors, I could see the sea of guests all turned toward the back of the church, waiting for me to appear. Instead, I walked straight down the center aisle in my wedding dress, my train dragging behind me, heading directly for the man I thought I was going to marry. The sanctuary doors swung open with a dramatic bang that silenced the organ mid-note. 150 faces turned toward me in shocked confusion as I stormed down the aisle, my cathedral train sweeping behind me like a white tornado. The afternoon sunlight streaming through the stained glass windows cast colorful shadows across my path, but all I could see was Marcus standing at the altar, his face cycling through surprise, confusion, and then pure terror as he realized something was very, very wrong. His best man, Tyler, took a step back. The officiant, Reverend Williams, clutched his Bible tighter and looked between Marcus and me with growing alarm. The church was so quiet you could hear the rustle of my dress against the marble floor. Rhea? Marcus's voice cracked slightly. He was wearing the charcoal gray suit we'd picked out together at Nordstrom, the navy tie that matched his eyes, and the watch I'd given him for Christmas. He looked exactly like the groom from my dreams, except for the guilty panic written across his features. I stopped 3 feet away from him, close enough to see the sweat beading on his forehead despite the cool temperature in the cathedral. 6 months, Marcus. 6 months you've been screwing my sister while planning our wedding with me. A collective gasp rippled through the congregation. I heard my mother's sharp intake of breath from the front row, followed by what sounded like my father muttering a string of curses under his breath. Marcus's parents, who had flown in from Vancouver, looked mortified. "Rhea, please, not here," Marcus whispered, glancing nervously at our guests. "We can talk about this privately." Privately? My voice was getting louder with each word. Like all those private meetings you've been having with Natasha? The ones where you told her you loved her while you were pretending to love me? Marcus's face drained of all color. He opened his mouth to deny it, but nothing came out. Behind me, I could hear people starting to murmur, phones being discreetly pulled out to record what was rapidly becoming the most dramatic wedding disaster in Seattle history. I have photos, Marcus, text messages, hotel receipts. Should I share them with everyone here, or do you want to tell them yourself how you've been living a double life for the past 6 months? Tyler stepped forward slightly, probably thinking he should intervene, but Marcus held up a hand to stop him. His shoulders sagged in defeat, and for a moment, he looked like he might actually collapse. "It wasn't supposed to happen," he said quietly. Though in the cathedral's acoustics, everyone could hear him. "I never meant to hurt you." "But you did it anyway." I was surprised by how steady my voice sounded when everything inside me was crumbling. Every time you kissed me goodnight after spending the day with her, every time we talked about our future while you were planning to leave me, every time I thanked you for being such an amazing, faithful partner. Marcus's mother stood up abruptly in the front pew. "What is going on here?" she demanded in her crisp Canadian accent. "Marcus, what is she talking about?" "He's been having an affair with my sister," I announced to the entire congregation, "the maid of honor who was supposed to walk down this aisle before me. They've been together for 6 months while we planned this wedding." The sanctuary erupted. Guests started talking all at once, some standing to get a better view of the drama unfolding at the altar. My Uncle Jim, who had never liked Marcus, shouted something I couldn't quite make out, but that definitely included the word bastard. Marcus's grandmother, a tiny elderly woman in the second row, started fanning herself vigorously with her program. Reverend Williams stepped forward, clearly out of his depth. "Perhaps we should adjourn to the vestry to discuss this matter privately." "No." I turned to face the congregation, my dress swirling dramatically around me. "Everyone deserves to know the truth. You all took time out of your lives, some of you traveled across the country, to celebrate what you thought was a love story. But it was all fake. The groom has been cheating with the maid of honor, and I just found out 20 minutes ago." My college roommate Sarah had made it to the sanctuary doors and was standing there with her mouth hanging open. Emma was right behind her, still clutching her bridesmaid bouquet. But there was no sign of Natasha. My cowardly sister had apparently disappeared, rather than face the consequences of her confession. Marcus finally found his voice again. "Ria, I know how this looks, but it's complicated. Natasha and we tried to fight it, but sometimes you can't control who you fall in love with." The audacity of that statement hit me like a physical slap. You fell in love while you were engaged to me? While we were picking out napkin colors and choosing our first dance song? "I was going to tell you," he said desperately. "I just didn't know how. I didn't want to hurt you right before the wedding." "So your plan was to marry me, and then what? Keep having an affair with my sister? Get divorced in a few months? String me along until you figured out a convenient time to break my heart?" Marcus looked like he wanted to disappear into the marble floor. "I thought maybe the feelings for Natasha would fade. I thought if I just went through with marrying you, everything would go back to normal." "Normal?" I laughed, but it was a harsh, bitter sound that echoed off the cathedral walls. "You thought you could marry me while being in love with someone else, and that would be normal?" His best man Tyler was slowly backing away from the altar, clearly wanting no part of this confrontation. The photographer, a consummate professional, was still taking pictures, though I'm sure these weren't the kind of wedding photos anyone had ordered. "I love you too, Ria," Marcus said, and the desperation in his voice was almost convincing. "What I have with Natasha, it's different, but that doesn't mean what we had wasn't real. What we had was based on lies." I started pulling off my engagement ring, the princess-cut diamond that had once represented all my dreams. It caught the light streaming through the stained glass as I held it up. This ring, this dress, this whole ceremony, it's all built on deception. I threw the ring at his feet, where it bounced once on the marble and rolled toward the altar rail. The sound was tiny, but in the hushed cathedral, it seemed to echo forever. The wedding is off, obviously. Reception's canceled. Everyone can go home or to the hotel bar, whatever you prefer. I'm sure there'll be plenty to talk about. I started to turn and walk back down the aisle, but Marcus grabbed my arm. "Wait, please. We can work this out. We can go to counseling. We can figure out how to move past this." I stared at his hand on my arm, then back at his face. For 3 years, I had looked at this man and seen my future. Now all I could see was a stranger who had been playing a role while living an entirely different life behind my back. "Move past this?" I pulled my arm free. "Marcus, you're in love with my sister."
My sister, who stood in my bridal suite this morning, helping me get ready to marry the man she's been sleeping with. There is no moving past this. There is no working it out. There is no us. And with that, I walked back down the aisle in my wedding dress, past the shocked faces of friends and family, past the photographer still capturing every moment, past the life I had built and believed in, toward whatever came next. The moment I stepped outside St. Mark's Cathedral, the crisp Seattle air hit my face like a wake-up call. The afternoon sun was still shining, birds were still chirping, and life was continuing exactly as it had an hour ago, except my entire world had just imploded. I stood on the cathedral steps in my wedding dress, watching normal people walk by on the sidewalk, completely unaware that they were witnessing the aftermath of a spectacular romantic disaster.
My hands were shaking so badly I couldn't figure out how to call an Uber. The wedding dress that had made me feel like a princess now felt like a costume from a play I no longer wanted to be in. The beading on the bodice that had seemed so elegant this morning now felt heavy and constricting, like armor I couldn't remove. "Rhea, honey, wait!" I turned to see my parents rushing down the cathedral steps, my father loosening his tie, and my mother hiking up her navy dress to navigate the stairs faster. Behind them, guests were streaming out of the church in confused clusters, everyone talking at once and stealing glances in my direction. "Oh, sweetheart," my mother said, reaching me first and pulling me into a fierce hug. "I am so sorry. I cannot believe that boy would do this to you." My father was practically vibrating with rage. I should have known there was something off about him. The way he looked at his phone during family dinners, how distracted he's been lately. I'm going to kill him. "Dad, please," I managed to say. "Can we just get out of here? I can't deal with everyone staring at me." "Of course, baby girl. Let me get the car." As my father jogged toward the parking lot, more people emerged from the cathedral. My college friends, Sarah and Emma, appeared at my side, still in their dusty rose bridesmaid dresses, but looking shell-shocked. "Rhea, we had no idea," Sarah said, grabbing my hand. "If we had known anything, we would have told you immediately." "I know you would have." I squeezed her hand back. "This isn't your fault." Emma was looking around frantically. "Where's Natasha? She just disappeared after you left the bridal suite. Her phone is going straight to voicemail." The mention of my sister's name sent a fresh wave of anger through me. She's probably halfway back to LA by now, or maybe she's with Marcus, celebrating their successful sabotage mission. "Don't say that," my mother said sharply. "Natasha may have made a terrible mistake, but she's still your sister. She's still my daughter." "Mom, she knew I was about to marry him, and she said nothing until 20 minutes before the ceremony. That wasn't a mistake. That was calculated cruelty." Before my mother could respond, my father pulled up in his BMW. "Get in, honey. Let's go home." Home. Except home was the apartment I shared with Marcus, filled with wedding gifts and our joint possessions and photos of our supposedly happy relationship. The townhouse in Bellevue we'd put a down payment on, the life we'd been building together for 3 years. "I can't go back to the apartment," I said, as I carefully gathered my train to get into the car. "All his stuff is there. I can't see his stuff right now." "You'll stay with us tonight," my mother said decisively. "We'll figure out the rest later." The drive to my parents' house in Magnolia was surreal. We passed the Fairmont Olympic Hotel, where our reception was supposed to be starting in 3 hours. I wondered if Marcus would show up there, maybe try to salvage something from this disaster, or if he'd finally grow a spine and run off with Natasha like he'd apparently wanted to do for months. My childhood bedroom looked exactly the same as when I left for college 8 years ago. Pink walls, white furniture, and posters of bands I'd forgotten I ever liked. My mother helped me out of the wedding dress, carefully hanging it in the closet like it was a museum piece rather than the costume from the worst day of my life. I put on old sweatpants and a University of Washington t-shirt, then sat on my narrow twin bed and stared at my reflection in the vanity mirror. My hair was still elaborately styled, my makeup still perfect, but my eyes looked hollow and unfamiliar. My phone had been buzzing constantly since we left the cathedral. Text messages, missed calls, social media notifications.
Word was already spreading through Seattle's surprisingly small social circles about the wedding that had ended in dramatic disaster. The first message was from my boss at the marketing firm. Heard what happened. Take all the time you need. So sorry, Rhea. Then my cousin in Portland. Mom just called and told me about Marcus. I'm driving up tomorrow. That bastard doesn't deserve you. My yoga instructor. Just saw the Facebook posts. Sending you love and strength. You're a warrior. Facebook posts. I opened the app with morbid curiosity and immediately regretted it. Someone had already posted photos from the cathedral, including a blurry shot of me confronting Marcus at the altar. The caption read, "Most dramatic wedding disaster in Seattle history. The groom was caught cheating with the maid of honor." It already had 47 likes and 23 comments. I switched the phone to airplane mode and threw it across the room. A soft knock on the door interrupted my spiral into social media hell. "Come in," I called. My mother entered carrying a tray with tea and the kind of cookies she used to make when I was sick as a child. She sat on the edge of the bed and handed me a steaming mug. "Your father's on the phone with the hotel, canceling everything," she said quietly. "The catering, the band, the flowers. He's also calling our insurance company to see what we can recover financially." The practical details felt overwhelming. How much money did we lose? "Don't worry about that right now, honey. Money is just money. What matters is that you're okay." But I wasn't okay. I was 26 years old, single, homeless, and the subject of what would undoubtedly become legendary Seattle gossip. The life I'd carefully planned and built over 3 years had been destroyed in 20 minutes. "I should have seen the signs," I said, more to myself than to my mother. All those late nights he claimed he was working, the way he started being secretive about his phone, how distracted he was during wedding planning. "Sweetheart," my mother said sharply, "this is not your fault. You trusted the people you loved. That's not a character flaw." But maybe it is. I took a sip of tea, grateful for something warm to focus on. Maybe I'm too naive, too trusting. Maybe I need to be more like Natasha, suspicious of everyone, looking out for myself first. "Don't you dare," my mother said sharply. "Your capacity to love and trust people is one of your greatest strengths. Don't let Marcus and Natasha's betrayal turn you cynical." We sat in silence for a while, listening to my father's voice drifting up from downstairs as he made phone call after phone call, canceling the life I'd thought I was starting, cleaning up the mess that had been made of my dreams. Eventually, my mother left me alone to rest, but I couldn't sleep. I couldn't stop my mind from racing through every interaction I'd had with Marcus and Natasha over the past 6 months, looking for clues I'd missed, signs I should have noticed. The engagement party, where Natasha had been unusually quiet. The weekend Marcus claimed he was sick, but seemed perfectly fine when I stopped by with soup. The way Natasha's visits to Seattle had increased in frequency recently, always with vague excuses about needing to get out of LA for a while. How many lies had they told me? How many times had they looked me in the eye and pretended to care about my happiness while they were destroying it behind my back?
As the sun set outside my childhood bedroom window, painting the walls pink and gold, I made a decision. I wasn't going to spend the rest of my life as a victim of their betrayal. I wasn't going to let them define my story as the naive girl who got humiliated on her wedding day. They had made their choice. Now I was going to make mine. I just had to figure out what that choice was going to be. 3 days after the wedding disaster, I was hiding in a corner booth at Victrola Coffee on Capitol Hill, wearing oversized sunglasses and a baseball cap like some kind of celebrity avoiding paparazzi. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was famous now, just not for the reasons I'd ever wanted to be. The barista who'd taken my order had definitely recognized me, and I'd caught at least 2 other customers sneaking photos with their phones. Seattle's coffee shop scene was usually my sanctuary, but everywhere I went felt like a potential ambush. Someone always knew someone who'd been at the wedding, and everyone wanted to either offer sympathy or get the inside scoop on what had really happened between Marcus and Natasha. I was scrolling mindlessly through apartment listings on my laptop, trying to figure out where I was going to live now that going back to the place I'd shared with Marcus was absolutely out of the question, when a familiar voice interrupted my brooding. "Rhea Morrison?"
Is that really you under there? I looked up to see a man in an expensive charcoal suit standing beside my table, and for a moment I couldn't place him. He was tall, probably 6'2", with dark hair that looked like he'd just stepped out of a magazine shoot, and the kind of confident smile that suggested he was used to getting whatever he wanted. Then it clicked. Daniel Blackwood? I pulled off my sunglasses, genuinely surprised. What are you doing in Seattle? Daniel had been Natasha's boyfriend during her senior year at USC, back when she was still pretending to care about getting her communications degree. I'd met him exactly twice, once at her graduation and once during a brief visit to LA where Natasha had dragged me to some ridiculously exclusive rooftop party in Beverly Hills. Both times, he'd been polite but distant, clearly more interested in whatever business deal he was working on than making small talk with his girlfriend's little sister. "Business meeting downtown," he said, gesturing toward the financial district. "Mind if I sit? You look like you could use some company." I glanced around the coffee shop, noting the curious stares from other customers. Having Daniel Blackwood sit at my table would definitely draw more attention, but maybe that wasn't necessarily a bad thing. At least he was someone who already knew about my family's particular brand of dysfunction. "Sure," I said, closing my laptop. "Though I should warn you, I'm not exactly great company these days." He slid into the booth across from me, and I was struck by how different he looked from the last time I'd seen him. That had been almost 3 years ago, and he'd seemed young and eager then, despite his obvious wealth. Now he carried himself with the kind of authority that came from serious success. Everything about him screamed money: the custom-tailored suit, the Patek Philippe watch, the way he commanded attention without even trying. "I heard about what happened," he said, simply. I let out a bitter laugh. Let me guess, it made the gossip rounds even in LA? I knew I was famous, but I didn't realize my humiliation had gone national. "Not exactly." Daniel's expression was carefully neutral. "Natasha called me." Those 3 words hit me like a physical blow. Of course she had. Of course, after destroying my life, my sister had reached out to her ex-boyfriend. Probably looking for comfort, or maybe just someone to validate her choices. "When?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "Sunday night. She was emotional." Emotional. I repeated the word like it tasted bad. She was emotional. How interesting. And what exactly did she tell you? Daniel studied my face for a moment before answering. "She said she'd made a terrible mistake, that she'd ruined your wedding and destroyed your relationship with Marcus, but she was in love and didn't know what else to do." "And you believed her?" I didn't call to discuss what I believed. His tone was cool, professional. I called to ask her why she thought it was appropriate to contact me about her personal drama when we haven't spoken in over 2 years. That surprised me. "You didn't comfort her?" Why would I comfort someone who just destroyed her sister's life for her own selfish reasons? Daniel's voice had an edge to it now. Natasha always was impulsive and self-centered, but this level of cruelty is impressive even for her. I stared at him, trying to process this unexpected perspective. Everyone else in my life was treating Natasha's betrayal like some kind of tragic love story. Star-crossed lovers who couldn't help themselves, a complicated situation with no clear villains. But Daniel was the first person to call it what it really was: calculated selfishness. "You really think she planned it?" I asked. "I think Natasha has never made a decision in her life without considering how it would benefit her first." Daniel signaled the barista for coffee. "The timing of her confession wasn't accidental. She could have told you about the affair months ago, or she could have kept quiet and let you get married. But telling you 20 minutes before the ceremony, that was designed for maximum drama and minimum consequences for her." "What do you mean, minimum consequences?"
Think about it, he said as the barista brought over his espresso. If she'd told you months ago, you would have had time to process it, maybe even forgive Marcus and work things out. She would have lost him. If she'd said nothing, you would have gotten married, and she'd had to live with being the other woman indefinitely. But telling you right before the ceremony, she gets to be the hero who saved you from marrying a cheater, and she gets Marcus all to herself. The logic was brutal but undeniable. I'd been so focused on my own devastation that I hadn't really analyzed Natasha's motivations beyond surface-level betrayal. But Daniel was right. The timing had been perfectly calculated to ensure she got exactly what she wanted while appearing to be doing me a favor. She always was strategic, I said quietly. Even when we were kids, she had this way of manipulating situations so she'd come out ahead. Exactly. Daniel took a sip of his espresso, which is why her phone call to me was so interesting. She wasn't looking for comfort or validation. She was fishing for information. What kind of information? She wanted to know about my current relationship status, what I've been working on, and whether I'm still based in LA. His smile was shark now, almost predatory. Apparently, things with Marcus aren't going as smoothly as she'd hoped. My heart rate picked up. What do you mean? According to Natasha, Marcus has been having second thoughts about their relationship. Apparently, the reality of being with her is quite different from the fantasy of sneaking around behind your back. He's been talking about trying to win you back. That's never going to happen, I said immediately. I know that. You know that. But Natasha is panicking. She thought destroying your wedding would guarantee her a happily ever after with Marcus, but instead, she's got a guilty, wishy-washy boyfriend who's having regrets. Daniel leaned back in his chair, clearly enjoying this development. So she's already looking for her next option. And she thinks that's you? She thinks that's me. He pulled out his phone and showed me a series of text messages. These started Monday morning. I read through them quickly, my anger building with each message. Natasha was laying it on thick, talking about how much she'd missed Daniel, how their relationship had been special, how she'd made a mistake letting him go. It was manipulative and transparent, but also desperately needy in a way I'd never seen from my confident older sister. She's scared, I realized. She should be. Daniel put his phone away. She burned every bridge in her life for a man who doesn't actually want her. And now she's realizing that actions have consequences. We sat in silence for a moment, and I found myself studying Daniel's face. There was something different about his energy now, a kind of focused intensity that hadn't been there when he was 24 and dating my sister. Success looked good on him. "Why are you telling me all this?" I asked. "Because," he said, meeting my eyes directly, "I think you deserve to know that your sister's betrayal is already backfiring on her. And because I have a proposition for you." My pulse quickened. What kind of proposition? Daniel's smile was slow and deliberate. The kind that would give you everything you want and leave Natasha with exactly what she deserves. Daniel's words hung in the air between us like a challenge. The coffee shop seemed to fade into background noise as I stared at him, trying to read the expression on his face. There was something almost dangerous in his smile, a hint of the ruthless businessman he'd clearly become since dating my sister. "I'm listening," I said carefully. He leaned forward, lowering his voice so only I could hear him. "Natasha destroyed your wedding because she thought she could have her cake and eat it too. She got Marcus, she gets to play the victim who was swept away by love, and she assumes you'll eventually forgive her because you're sisters, and that's what family does. That's not happening." I know, but she doesn't know that yet. Daniel's eyes are sharp, calculating. She's also assuming that Marcus will eventually stop feeling guilty and commit to building a real relationship with her. But from what I can tell from her increasingly desperate text messages, that's not happening either. I thought about Marcus, probably holed up in our apartment, surrounded by wedding gifts and the remnants of the life we'd planned together. The reality of what he'd done, the public humiliation, the bridges he'd burned, it was probably hitting him hard now that the initial rush of forbidden romance had worn off. "So what exactly are you proposing?" I asked. Daniel pulled out a small leather notebook and slid it across the table. Inside was a business card with elegant black lettering. Blackwood Industries, Strategic Acquisitions. Below that, in smaller print, Daniel Blackwood. "You've been busy," I said, genuinely impressed at myself. "Very busy. In the past 3 years, I've built a portfolio of tech companies worth about $2.7 billion. He said it casually, like he was discussing the weather. "I've got houses in Malibu, Manhattan, and Aspen. And last month, I was featured on the cover of Forbes."
Congratulations, I said, though I wasn't sure where this was going. The point is, Natasha made a very expensive mistake when she chose Marcus over me. Daniel's smile turned predatory, and I think it's time she learned exactly how expensive. My heart started beating faster. What did you have in mind? Marry me. The words were so unexpected that I actually laughed out loud. I'm sorry, what? Marry me, he repeated, completely seriously. Not for real, obviously, a business arrangement. 6 months, maybe a year. Long enough to make the point crystal clear. I stared at him like he'd lost his mind. Daniel, we barely know each other. We've had exactly 3 conversations in our entire lives, including this one. Which makes it perfect, he said smoothly. No messy emotions to complicate things. Just a mutually beneficial arrangement that gives us both what we want. And what exactly do you want, according to you?
Revenge. The word was simple, direct. You want Natasha to see exactly what she threw away when she chose to betray you. You want Marcus to realize he destroyed his life for someone who was already looking for her next upgrade. And you want everyone who witnessed your humiliation to see you not just surviving, but thriving. He wasn't wrong about any of that. The fantasy of showing up somewhere with a gorgeous, successful man who was clearly crazy about me had definitely crossed my mind during my darker moments over the past few days. What do you get out of it? I asked. Entertainment value, mostly. Daniel shrugged. Natasha put me through my own version of hell when we dated. She was manipulative, unfaithful, and ultimately left me for someone she thought had more to offer. Watching her realize she destroyed her relationship with her sister for a man who doesn't even want her, that's worth a few months of my time. You want revenge too. I want justice. There's a difference. He finished his espresso and set the cup down with a decisive clink. Natasha has spent her entire life using people and discarding them when something better comes along. It's time she faced some consequences. I found myself actually considering it, which probably said something disturbing about my current mental state. But there was an appealing logic to Daniel's proposal. Natasha had calculated that her betrayal would leave her better off than before. What if she was wrong? How would it work? I heard myself asking. Simple. We date publicly for a few weeks, get engaged, have a beautiful wedding that makes your canceled one look like a backyard barbecue. We maintain the charade for 6 months to a year, then have an amicable divorce. You get to live like a billionaire's wife for a while, and everyone gets to see that you landed on your feet in spectacular fashion. And then you go back to your life, several $1,000,000 richer thanks to a generous divorce settlement, and Natasha gets to live with the knowledge that she destroyed her family for absolutely nothing. The plan was insane. It was also brilliant. And the more I thought about it, the more appealing it became. Not just for the revenge aspect, though that was certainly part of it, but for the freedom it would give me. 6 months to a year of not having to worry about money, not having to rebuild my entire life from scratch, not having to be the object of everyone's pity. There would have to be rules, I said slowly. Of course, this is a business arrangement, not a romantic comedy. Daniel pulled out his phone and opened the Notes app. What kind of rules? No actual intimacy. We can hold hands and kiss for photos, but that's it. Separate bedrooms, separate baths. I'm not looking to complicate this with actual feelings. Agreed. What else? I want to know exactly how this ends before it begins. I don't want any surprises about the divorce timeline or settlement. Fair enough. I'm thinking of a prenup that guarantees you $5 million if the marriage lasts 6 months, $10 million if it goes a full year. I nearly choked on my coffee. That's a lot of money. It's pocket change compared to what I'm worth, and it needs to be enough to make the statement we're trying to make. Daniel made a note on his phone. Anything else? I want veto power over public appearances. I'm not going to be paraded around like a trophy wife if I'm not comfortable with something. Done. But I do need you to commit to playing the part convincingly. No half-hearted hand-holding or fake smiles that look obviously fake. If we're going to do this, we do it right. I thought about Natasha, probably scrolling through social media right now, looking for updates on my post-wedding breakdown.
I thought about Marcus, maybe starting to realize that trading a stable relationship for dramatic passion wasn't working out the way he'd fantasized. I thought about all the guests at my wedding, probably still talking about the spectacle they'd witnessed. There's one more thing, I said. I want Natasha to be at the wedding. Daniel's eyebrows shot up. That seems like a recipe for disaster. Maybe, but she needs to see it happen. She needs to watch me marry a man who's everything Marcus isn't. Successful, decisive, completely devoted to me. She needs to understand that her betrayal didn't break me, it freed me. And if she tries to object, creates a scene, then she'll look exactly like what she is, a jealous, manipulative woman who can't stand to see her sister happy. I smiled, and for the first time in days, it felt genuine. Besides, wouldn't that make the whole thing even more satisfying? Daniel laughed, a rich sound that drew glances from other customers. You know what? You're absolutely right. Natasha at the wedding it is. He extended his hand across the table, and after a moment's hesitation, I shook it. His grip was firm, confident, and warm. Partners? He asked. Partners, I agreed. And just like that, I went from being the humiliated ex-bride hiding in coffee shops to being engaged to one of the most eligible billionaires on the West Coast. Natasha was going to lose her mind. 6 weeks after shaking hands with Daniel Blackwood in that Capitol Hill coffee shop, I was standing in the bridal suite at the Four Seasons Olympic Hotel, wearing a custom Vera Wang gown that cost more than most people's cars. This dress made my previous wedding dress look like something from a department store clearance rack. Hand-beaded with Swarovski crystals, a dramatic cathedral train, and a neckline that was both elegant and breathtaking, it was the kind of dress that would be featured in Vogue.
The irony wasn't lost on me that I was getting ready for my second wedding in 2 months, except this time I knew exactly what I was getting into. Mrs. Blackwood-to-be, my new stylist, Celeste, said as she made final adjustments to my veil, "You look absolutely radiant." Mrs. Blackwood. The name still felt foreign, but I had to admit it had a nice ring to it. Daniel had insisted on hiring the best of everything for this wedding, the most exclusive venue, the most sought-after photographer, the kind of flowers that required flying in specialists from 3 different countries. Every detail was designed to make a statement, and that statement was, Rhea Morrison didn't just survive her sister's betrayal, she won the lottery. The guest list was carefully curated for maximum impact. Everyone who had witnessed my humiliation at St. Mark's Cathedral had received an elegant invitation to witness my triumph at the Four Seasons. Seattle's social elite, business leaders, and even a few celebrities Daniel knew from his LA connections. The kind of wedding that would be talked about for years. And yes, Natasha had been invited. My phone buzzed with a text from Daniel. "Ready when you are, partner. You look incredible, by the way. I can see you from the security cameras." I smiled, despite my nerves. Over the past 6 weeks, Daniel and I had fallen into a surprisingly easy partnership. We'd had dinner together twice a week, attended charity galas, and even spent a weekend at his Malibu house getting our story straight. He was charming, intelligent, and surprisingly funny when he wasn't being ruthlessly strategic. I could see why Natasha had fallen for him, and why she was probably kicking herself now. Because our relationship had definitely made waves. The engagement announcement in the Seattle Times had been accompanied by a photo of Daniel's massive emerald-cut diamond ring on my finger, a ring that made Marcus's modest proposal look pathetic by comparison. The society pages had covered our appearances at various events, always with glowing descriptions of how radiant and transformed I looked. But the real masterpiece had been the interview we'd given to Seattle Met magazine 2 weeks ago. Daniel had played the role of the smitten billionaire perfectly, talking about how he'd been quietly in love with Rhea for years, but had never acted on it because she was with someone else. The story painted him as the patient romantic hero who'd waited for his chance, and me as the woman who'd finally found her true match after escaping a relationship that was clearly wrong from the start. The magazine had hit newsstands yesterday, and my phone had been buzzing non-stop with congratulations, interview requests, and one particularly satisfying message from Marcus that simply said, I made the biggest mistake of my life. Too little, too late. Time to go, Celeste announced, handing me my bouquet, white orchids and peonies that had been flown in from Ecuador that morning. The Four Seasons ballroom had been transformed into something that looked like a fairy tale. Crystal chandeliers, thousands of white roses, and enough candlelight to create an atmosphere of pure magic. As I stood at the entrance, I could see 300 guests seated in gold Chiavari chairs, all turned toward the altar where Daniel waited in a custom Tom Ford tuxedo. He looked every inch the billionaire groom, confident, devastatingly handsome, and completely focused on me as I began my walk down the aisle. The string quartet played Pachelbel's Canon, the same song that had been playing during my disaster at St. Mark's, but this time it felt triumphant instead of tragic. And there, in the third row on the left side, sat Natasha. She'd flown up from LA yesterday, probably thinking she could talk me out of this marriage or cause some kind of scene that would ruin my day like I'd ruined hers. But instead, she was sitting there in a simple black dress, looking like she was attending a funeral instead of a wedding. Marcus was conspicuously absent. According to my mother, they'd broken up 2 weeks after my original wedding when he couldn't stop talking about wanting me back. As I walked past Natasha's row, I made sure to catch her eye. The look on her face was everything I'd hoped for: shock, regret, and the dawning realization that her calculated betrayal had backfired spectacularly. She'd traded her sister's love and a billionaire ex-boyfriend for a man who'd ultimately chosen guilt over her, leaving her with nothing while I'd landed the ultimate prize. Daniel's smile when I reached the altar was warm and genuine, and for a moment I almost forgot this was all an elaborate performance. He took my hands, and his were steady and reassuring. "You're perfect," he whispered, so quietly only I could hear. The ceremony was flawless. Reverend Thompson from the Presbyterian Church delivered a beautiful homily about love, commitment, and finding your true partner after surviving life's storms. Daniel and I had written our own vows, and his were masterfully crafted to tell the story we wanted everyone to believe: that he'd loved me from afar, respected my relationship with Marcus, and was now thrilled to finally have his chance at happiness with me. My vows focused on gratitude, second chances, and finding love when you least expect it. I talked about how Daniel had shown me what real partnership looked like, how he'd supported me through my darkest time, and how excited I was to build a future with someone who truly valued me. When Daniel slipped the platinum wedding band onto my finger, right next to the enormous engagement ring, I heard someone in the audience, probably my mother, start crying. When I placed his ring on his finger, he squeezed my hand gently. "You may kiss the bride," Reverend Thompson announced. Daniel's kiss was gentle, respectful, and lasted exactly long enough to look romantic without being inappropriate. The ballroom erupted in applause, and as we turned to face our guests as Mr. and Mrs. Blackwood, I caught sight of Natasha again. She was clapping politely, but tears were streaming down her face. The reception was a showcase of everything money could buy: a 7-course dinner prepared by a James Beard award-winning chef, champagne that cost more per bottle than most people spent on rent, and entertainment by a jazz ensemble that had flown in from New York specifically for our wedding. Daniel and I had our first dance to At Last by Etta James, and he was surprisingly graceful as he spun me around the dance floor. We'd practiced this routine at his house, but somehow it felt more now, in front of all these people who believed we were genuinely in love. "How do you think we're doing?" I murmured, as he dipped me dramatically. "I think we're giving the performance of our lives," he replied with a grin. During the father-daughter dance, my dad whispered in my ear, "I like this one much better than Marcus. Daniel looks at you like you're the most important person in the world." If only he knew that was exactly what we'd been practicing. The evening continued with toasts from Daniel's business partners, my college friends, and finally, a surprise appearance at the microphone by Natasha herself. "I'd like to say a few words about my sister," she began, her voice shaky with emotion. The ballroom went quiet. Everyone knew about our history, about what had happened at my first wedding, and they were clearly expecting some kind of dramatic confrontation. "Ria has always been the strong one in our family," Natasha continued, looking directly at me. "She's loyal, forgiving, and believes the best in people. Sometimes that means she gets hurt by people who don't deserve her. Her voice broke slightly. But sometimes it means she finds exactly what she deserves, someone who recognizes how extraordinary she is and treats her accordingly. She raised her champagne glass, and her smile was genuine, if heartbroken. To Rhea and Daniel, may you have all the happiness I was too selfish to want for you before. The toast was perfect, gracious, apologetic without being pathetic, and completely public. It was exactly what a manipulative person would say to try to rehabilitate their image, but coming from Natasha, who looked genuinely devastated, it felt more like a surrender. As the evening wound down and guests began to leave, Daniel and I stood by the door, thanking everyone for coming. We were the picture of newlywed bliss. He kept his arm around my waist, I leaned into him naturally, and we both glowed with the satisfaction of a plan executed flawlessly. Natasha was one of the last to leave. She approached us hesitantly, clutching a small gift bag. "Congratulations," she said quietly. "I hope you'll be very happy together." "Thank you," I replied, my voice coolly polite. "It was good of you to come." She handed me the gift bag, and inside was a simple silver picture frame with a photo of the two of us as children, arms around each other, grinning at the camera. The inscription on the frame read, "Sisters Forever." "I know I don't deserve forgiveness," she said, tears threatening again, "but I hope someday you might consider it." I looked at the photo, then at my sister, then at Daniel, who squeezed my hand supportively. "Maybe someday," I said finally, "but not today." Natasha nodded, understanding, and walked away into the Seattle night. 3 months later, Daniel and I were having dinner at his penthouse, discussing the logistics of our upcoming divorce, when he said something that surprised me. "You know, this hasn't been nearly as much of a business arrangement as I expected." I looked up from my pasta. "What do you mean?" "I mean, somewhere along the way, I started actually enjoying being married to you. You're funny, you're smart, you challenge me, and you make excellent coffee." He smiled. "What do you think about making this arrangement a little more permanent?" I stared at him, trying to figure out if he was serious. "Daniel, are you actually proposing to your fake wife?" "I'm suggesting that my fake wife might want to consider becoming my real wife. No more separate bedrooms, no more business arrangement, just us." Looking at him across the dinner table in his ridiculously expensive apartment, I realized that somewhere along the way, I'd started enjoying being married to him too. The revenge against Natasha had been satisfying, but the daily partnership with Daniel had been unexpectedly wonderful. "You know what?" I said, reaching for his hand. "I think I'd like that." And that's how my sister's betrayal led me to the best decision I ever made. Natasha got exactly what she deserved, nothing. Marcus got exactly what he deserved, regret and loneliness. And I got something I never expected, a real partnership with someone who valued me enough to help me get revenge, and then valued me enough to want to make it real. Sometimes the best revenge is living well. Sometimes it's living extraordinarily well with your sister's billionaire ex-boyfriend who turned out to be the love of your life. Either way, I won. Looking for more? We've got 2 amazing stories ready for you right on screen. If this one touched you, these are absolutely worth your time. Click to watch them now. And hey, subscribe and hit that bell to never miss our latest uploads.